Welcome back to Troubleshooting Agile. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi, Squirrel.
So I'm in Portugal. You're in California, as you usually are. We're using a different way of recording, so I hope this all works. But I think rather than talk about any of that cool technological or travel material, I'd like to talk to you about why you're so frustrated. Because, Jeffrey, when you got on and started chatting to me, you sounded like you wanted to have a cow on the podcast. So I think I should get out of your way. What are you so frustrated by?
Sure. I've been talking to a couple of people, well, several people, many people, a whole room full of people this week about AI. And it's maybe we're saying here, if you want to talk about AI, you should come to KitCon in May. But we've talked about it before. But reminder about that. So,
It'll be in the show notes, and I'm not going to call it KitCon AI, even if you do, Jeffrey, because I
okay.
think we should talk about other stuff besides AI. But I think the AI is what's frustrating you. So let's talk about that today.
It is, and I'm frustrated a couple different things, and I'll say, in part, I'm frustrated because there are some things I'm really excited with about AI, and in particular, I'm excited about the topic of agentic validation, but I want to come back to that in a minute because what I'm frustrated with about was I think it comes into the kind of the question of like change management and people who are saying like we have to figure out how to roll this out AI out to um, all of our developers or all of our whole company. How are we going to roll AI out? And on the one hand, this is the right conversation to be happening. But the one thing is, I do feel like I've been having change management conversations with people from, roughly, the 2000s or so, from the very early days of Agile, of, how are we going to get people on board? And I think we've learned a lot of lessons. And it's not obvious to me that people are really going and looking at our toolkit and what has worked in the past and making those, mining those for, here's what we did before that was successful in rolling stuff out, and we should probably emulate that. And so I was a little bit frustrated by some of those conversations because I felt like they weren't learning lessons of history. But also, I was more frustrated by some of the specifics, and in particular, the discussion I heard in one case about people talking about how they were helping the product managers because they were asking them, where they spent their time. And they're like, oh, one of the things they spent a lot of time on was digging through Jira and finding, the latest status of everything and compiling it all together and writing it up. And it took them a while to put together their weekly status reports. And so then now they were really happy because they had the AI, the LLMs to do that for them. And
Let
I
me
think
just clarify for folks who might be less technical. Jira, you may not have been inflicted upon you. So if you haven't been, it doesn't seem to stand for anything, and it certainly seems to be a huge time suck for people who are trying to track projects. So it's in theory supposed to help project and product managers, but in fact, it seems to add an awful lot of bureaucracy. So it's a piece of software that is supposed to help product managers. That's the most positive thing I can manage to force myself to say.
yeah,
Keep
it's
going, Jeffrey.
it's like a lot of things. It's a work tracker. Yeah. So um, the thing is that is I can't in my bones I feel like the next thing they're going to discover is that the people who these weekly project reports go to spend a lot of time reading them, and so the next thing they're going to do is going to have an LLM to read them, and so we're going to have LLMs creating an artifact and LLMs consuming an artifact, and it kind of feels like we're doing something wrong in there, and I think that's that this we have this great opportunity to reconsider what we're doing, to say like what was the point of the status report, if the point of the status report was to make sure that the product manager was actually paying attention and this is about getting them to engage their brain, well then having the report written by the LLM might not be achieving that goal, if the goal was to go and alert the executive that or whoever it is up the chain that the status reports are going to, well then maybe we could do something more direct rather than just recreating the artifact that we have by sort of historical accident. And
So let me argue with you, Jeffrey, because I don't agree with you in one specific case,
okay.
and that's the specific case of building a brick wall. Because if I build a brick wall, project management on that brick wall consists of checking that I have bricks, that they are of decent quality, that I'm laying enough of them, and that I'm putting them in the right shape so that I wind up with a brick wall where I'm supposed to have it and the foundation's deep enough and so on. People have been building brick walls for several millennia.
Yeah.
It's kind of a settled question how to build a brick wall and how quickly you should be able to do it and how big the brick should be and so on. That's kind of known. And if you want to get status on it, you really should just count. And guess what's really good at counting? It's a computer.
Yes.
So what you could do is say, well, look, I have something, a piece of software, a project of any kind that is simple enough and well understood enough that it's like building a brick wall. And I'm
Okay.
not trying to build a special, different kind of brick wall out of like transparent bricks or something. I'm just trying to build a normal brick wall. Then I really think that the AI could write the status report. And having another AI read it and notice that the brick wall is in the wrong place and alert yet another AI sounds like a great plan because we understand brick walls. The problem is people keep trying to apply it to software, ordinary software of the kind that you pay for and that you run to do a bespoke custom task. And that kind of software is nothing like building bricks because you have no idea what it's supposed to do. So I agree with you in a little, in a big part, Jeffrey, but there's at least a small piece where actually I think that would be a good idea to have the AI write the status report that says we laid 500 bricks this afternoon.
Okay, look, fair enough. I'm gonna say I'm all in favor of using having computers do counting. Let me do that. And actually, it reminds me of his old Alistair Coburn quote, which is about to successful projects involve people, and therefore it's worth understanding the strengths and weaknesses and attributes of people. This is his paper, People Considered a First Order Nonlinear Component of Software Development.
Brilliant
What
paper. We'll link in the show notes.
Yeah, and so to the extent that we're taking something that humans are bad at, which is consistency, what often gets called, quote unquote, discipline, doing the same way every single time. Yeah, humans are bad at that, and computers are better at it, and so it makes sense to use the computers for that. And I think that what's interesting about your case is that what you're describing is it actually touches on my point about what I'm excited about with agentic validation. You're describing in some cases it's so simple that the counting itself is valid data generation. We have useful valid data coming in from that, and to it's sort of proof of work if we have the bricks that we said were going to be there are there. And I think that's great. The thing that you're describing here is that we know what we want from bricks, but we don't know what we want from software. But I would argue that we should, in general, have a much better idea of what we want from software. We should have predictions of what we think our software changes are going to do, and that I think a lot more of our going forward, we should be much more explicit about documenting what we think our predictions are, and then having the AI validate that those things are actually happening in production. Um, I've done this in the past in a small way with humans where we would go and look to see like, yes, is this thing happening? We've been talking for a decade. There used to be a phrase that I liked, which was monitoring driven development. Can we see the outcome of our changes in the monitoring system that we expected? And when things aren't working, do we see the monitoring alert? I think,
The extreme version of that is companies like Etsy or Amazon, where they'll roll out some change, or there are a bunch of trading companies on financial markets that do this. They'll roll out something, and if people click it, then they start stabilizing and making it better and using it if people are interested in buying whatever it is.
mhm.
But if nobody clicks it, they don't bother to debug it and test it and do all kinds of stuff. They just say, okay, people don't want to buy polka dot toilet paper. Let's try another product. And if you can do those kinds of experiments very quickly, which AI enables, and if you can monitor the results quickly, then you have a very interesting sort of evolutionary process going on there.
Yeah, that's right. And what I think of here about this is a very simple version of this was at the company IMView back in 2009. Timothy Fitz wrote an article called "Doing the Impossible 50 Times a Day," and he
Also will
described
be in the show notes.
he described their cluster immune system because they had an inherent universal prediction that when they rolled software out, the business metrics, like the rate of dollars per second coming in, should stay the same or go up. And if it went down, then they would pause the rollout and investigate what happened. And now I think going ideally we can make better predictions than that, more refined than simply number not go down. But that is the kind of thing that I think we can be building more of into our systems that AI is good at, is good for, to be able to say, when we get out to production, are our predictions holding true? And I think this is the key point I want to stress here, a lot of people are excited about software creation with AI, but the value comes in production. And if it's not giving the outcome we wanted in production, then we're not getting the value, period. So if we really want to be closing the loop about what we're doing, I think it's really important that we're looking at production and we're thinking at the beginning about what's the outcome we expect to see there, and then having the AI be around to validate that that is, happening on an ongoing basis. And because I don't want to have people out there, monitoring the system all the time to make sure that the things we thought would be true are always true, because they'll get tired and whatnot. But this is exactly the kind of thing where I think we could be getting enough context to the AI about what we want to have happening to tell it to see if it actually is happening and tell us when it's not.
And that inspires me with two different thoughts. One of which is about AIs, and one of it which is about people, and both of which could be future podcasts. So listeners, tell us if either of these are interesting. The first one is that one of the big, really cutting edge innovations in AI is the crazy, wild 50-year-old idea of a loop. So, which you referred to, Jeffrey,
Yeah.
that it turns out if you tell an AI to start again every time it finishes, that it does a lot of stuff. Now, a lot of the stuff it does is kind of stupid, but Jeffrey, you were telling me about people who are automating their houses, and I have clients and folks experimenting with OpenClaw and similar things that are rapidly making improvements and sometimes spectacular failures as the AI tries multiple things, kind of in a gradient descent kind of way, moving toward what it hopes is a better outcome. Well, if you could monitor that and if you can measure it very nicely, then you get some very interesting behavior from your AI in a loop.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're suggesting to us, Jeffrey, is that if we were able to loop and have the AI try a number of different things, all being guided and shepherded toward a positive outcome of making more money or building a better system by some metric that you're measuring, that seems like it could be really useful. So that's one idea. And then the other that struck me as you were describing sort of how we might manage these status reports and when they'd be useful and who might use them. And of course, I was then thinking about how do we put them in a loop. But something that I was reminded of is, and I'll ask you, Jeffrey, but also our listeners. Jeffrey, have you ever read a board pack?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that's in there that drives me bananas because I'm terrible with it is financial charts, business. What are they? Balance sheets and cash flow projections and stuff like that. So board packs are full of that, right? Somebody's reporting to the board on the financial results, which is what we're just talking about here. Are we making more dollars per second or not? And of course, I'm very interested in that question, but the way CFOs tend to report that makes my eyes glaze over. I just can't follow it. But there's something wonderful that financial people do, and us software people should do much more of it, and especially in order to inform our AIs. And that is to write a little narrative at the bottom of each chart that says something like, if we keep having a reduction in the flow of oil due to world events, then we're going to run out of money in 3 months and we'll have to close the business. That narrative is really useful, and you get a lot more out of that narrative than you do out of a chart that kind of goes down to zero if you don't understand the chart, which is typically what happens to me. So it just strikes me that since AIs are really good at reading words, and humans seem to be not too bad at summarizing what charts mean, and we care about getting charts to go the right direction, we might have something useful coming out of that. We might have some way of evolving toward a better outcome using our AIs instead of just relying on them to write kind of mindless brick counting status reports. What do you think, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot in what you're saying, and I agree that there's a lot of potential in here in using the power of narrative. And it's definitely true that that's one of the great things about the LLMs is that we can essentially we speak a similar language now in a way that was less true before. It's not perfect, and it has all the same flaws that language and the imprecision of language has always had. But I think we can do a lot there. The one thing I want to say is about the loop. the one place that I want to stress is there's this thing about um, it's not always about creating the new thing. It's not always about uh, what next thing we can do. To me, what I'm probably most excited about is the long duration. That most money on spent on software projects is in maintenance after we're done. And so the idea that we can say that, well, here's the ways.
Done in inverted commas,
Yeah,
because we're not actually done.
but well, we'd like to be done. And the challenge there is how do we know that the sort of promises we were making about the software, about how it should behave, continue to hold true over time? And the idea of having the agentic systems that can validate that the system is still working as intended, and not just at release or a month later, but years later, is part one of the things I'm super excited. So it's that ongoing value of the work we do yesterday. The things we did yesterday are still delivering value today, and a week later, and a year later, and several years later. That's the part. One of the things I'm really excited about when I talk about agentic validation. Um, there is that sort of upfront loop you're describing, but people in software already spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I think they don't spend enough time thinking about that long-term, long tail, the all the future history of the system. And I think that deserves more attention. And we have an opportunity to change the way that we're building software with AI in a way that makes it much easier to continue delivering that value and know that to validate that we're delivering that value into the future.
And I just have this feeling that our listeners are going to prompt us to go in one of these directions. I'm going to give them one more to vote for, and that is the before we have to go. I just want to make the point that if you're going to be measuring your software in the future, one of the things listeners who might have tried that will say is, "Oh, come on, Squirrel and Jeffrey. The purpose of the software evolves. You start out with something that's supposed to track how many widgets you're making, and suddenly people start also using it for the managing the supply chain and working out what the union rate should be and how many contractors we need." Yes, that's correct. The great thing is the narrative is usually the same. The point of building the software was to improve your dollars for widget ratio, right? You were trying to get a number to improve, and you discover more bottlenecks and more problems that the software can actually help you with, and you add features and you add things to it so it can manage your factory or your e-commerce website or whatever it is in a more efficient and better way, pursuing the same original narrative. Great thing is AIs are good at that now. Computers used to be, need huge amounts of handholding and interpretation and explanation in order to understand. Well, it's kind of like what you have to do with me to make me understand a balance sheet, right? You need to explain it in words of like half a syllable. But now we can write them a little narrative and say, go and check. Here's all the monitoring we have. Propose new monitoring or add new monitoring yourself. But go and figure out whether we are running an efficient factory. And if we're not, find the bottleneck. Don't fix it, but tell me what it is. And eventually we'll tell them, and go fix it. And if you can get that going in a loop, maybe you could actually just go lie on the beach and you'd make more money. What do you think?
Well, we'll see about that. I mean, that's the ultimate promise, but from my work with AI so far, I'm not quite at beach time yet. but but
No, I'm not either.
but we're getting closer. We're getting closer. And what you're describing, that narrative part is certainly part of it.
Excellent. Well, I've lost count of how many sort of future directions we have. I think, Jeffrey, we could go on talking about this for hours, but it's late here in Portugal and I need to get to bed. So why don't we do this? Listeners, if you want us to talk more about any of these things, just pick up one of them and drop us a note, and I'll tell you how to do that in a second. That also includes if you violently disagree with us. If you think having AI write your status reports is the greatest thing since sliced bananas, we'd like to hear about that. Because maybe you're right, and maybe in your situation it is, or we can help our listeners understand and learn from you, or something else. Maybe you're just wrong, and we'll argue with you. That's fine too. If you want to do any of those things, the best place to go is to agileconversations.com, where you will find our book, Agile Conversations, and conversational dojo guides, and all kinds of other free stuff as well as more ways to get in touch with us than you can shake a stick at. So point your open claw or whatever you have at us, and I don't think we've actually gotten any AIs writing to us, but if there are any out there, we'd be happy to hear from you as well. But mostly our podcast is for humans. So whoever's at Carbon or Silicon, go ahead and get in touch with us on those channels if you'd like to, and we would sure like to debate these topics more, because I'm fired up about them. I think there's all kinds of interesting possibilities here. Of course, the other thing you can do is come back again next week when we'll have another edition of Troubleshooting Agile. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Squirrel.